Intelligence analysts are making a lot of noise about this satellite image. It seems to show a Chinese Type 094, a nuclear-powered ballistic missile submarine. And get this, it's docked at Longpo Naval Base with its missile hatches open.
It's definitely not something you see every day. A submarine, and we're talking about one that can launch nuclear missiles with its hatches open while it's docked.
Okay, so let's unpack this a little. First off, where exactly is Longpo Naval Base, and what makes its location so important?
Well, Longpo is on Hainan Island, and Hainan Island sits strategically in the South China Sea. This location, it really puts the base right in the thick of things, geopolitically speaking. You've got China asserting its territorial claims there, bumping up against neighboring countries.
So this isn't just another naval base, right? It's a potential flashpoint in a region that's already pretty tense.
Right.
What about the Type 094 submarine itself? What makes it stand out?
The Type 094 is essentially the heart of China's sea-based nuclear deterrent. Each one of these submarines packs a punch. We're talking about the ability to carry up to 12 long-range nuclear missiles.
12 nuclear missiles on just one submarine. That's a lot of firepower. What kind of missiles are we talking about specifically?
The Pentagon believes that these submarines are equipped with two types of submarine-launched ballistic missiles, the JL-2 and the JL-3. Now, the JL-2 has a range of 3,900 nautical miles, so theoretically it could hit the U.S. East Coast from waters near Hawaii.
So a good chunk of the United States is within striking distance with that kind of range. What about the JL-3? How does that compare?
The JL-3 is even more powerful. Its range is estimated to be around 5,400 nautical miles, which means it could potentially hit targets across the continental United States from waters a lot closer to China.
So these missiles represent a big jump in China's nuclear capabilities.
Yeah.
It seems like they really changed the whole strategic game, especially when it comes to their ability to deter potential adversaries.
Absolutely, you're spot on. These missiles are a game changer for China's nuclear deterrent strategy. We're seeing a shift here from a regional power projection capability to a global one, and that's raising eyebrows in Washington and other capitals around the world.
Now, the Pentagon's assessment is that China is conducting these, what they call near-continuous at-sea deterrence patrols with these submarines. How does that approach compare to how the U.S. handles nuclear submarine patrols?
The U.S. takes a different approach. Our nuclear-armed submarines are on patrol all the time, submerged and constantly moving throughout the oceans. This constant presence makes them incredibly difficult to track and target, which of course enhances their survivability and ensures a credible deterrent.
So China's approach, while it's becoming more frequent, isn't quite at the level of the U.S. in terms of this constant underwater presence. What could this tell us about their overall strategy, their confidence in their submarine force?
It suggests that they might still be in a developmental stage, still working out their operational tactics and procedures. These patrols could be about testing the reliability and endurance of their submarine fleet as they gradually extend their operational reach.
Kind of like they're easing into these continuous deterrence patrols, learning as they go and adapting their strategies based on what they find out.
Exactly. They're likely gathering valuable data on how their submarines perform, how their crews are trained, and how effective they are overall in maintaining that credible sea-based nuclear deterrent.
Let's go back to that satellite image that got everyone talking. It showed a crane operating over the submarine's open missile hatches. What are the possible explanations for what was going on? Is it as alarming as some people might think?
Well, that's where things get a bit more interesting. The image has sparked a lot of speculation about missile loading or unloading. But the thing is, open hatches and a crane don't automatically mean that's what's happening.
So it's not a sure thing based just on the image. What are some other possible explanations for what we're seeing?
Oh, there are definitely other possibilities. For instance, the activity could be routine maintenance, or logistical tasks, the kind of things that would require access to the missile compartments. Remember, submarines are complex pieces of machinery. They need regular upkeep to make sure they're ready to go when needed.
So the open hatches could just be part of normal maintenance procedures, not necessarily a sign of anything malicious.
Exactly. Especially those carrying ballistic missiles, they need regular inspections, repairs, and upgrades. And that often means opening hatches and using cranes to move equipment around.
So it sounds like we need to be careful about reading too much into the image. What are some other factors that might make it difficult to figure out what's really happening?
One big factor is the inherent challenge of open source intelligence. Satellite imagery can give us valuable glimpses into military activities, but it rarely tells the whole story. It's a snapshot in time. And without additional context or information, it's hard to say for sure what's going on.
So we're left with more questions than answers, which, let's face it, is often the case when you're dealing with this kind of sensitive information. It highlights how relying solely on open-source intelligence can limit our understanding of complex military operations.
It's a reminder that we need to be cautious in our analysis and avoid jumping to conclusions based on limited information. The image raises interesting questions, but it doesn't provide clear-cut answers.
This whole thing really highlights the challenges of trying to make sense of military activities, especially in a place as sensitive as the South China Sea. How does this specific image, this submarine being at Longpo, fit into the bigger picture, the geopolitics of the South China Sea?
The South China Sea, it's complicated. You've got these territorial disputes, economic interests, countries trying to show their strength. China's claims there, they're not agreed on by everyone. You've got countries like Vietnam, the Philippines, Malaysia, Brunei. They all have their own views. And then you have the United States. They don't make a claim on the territory itself, but they have a big interest in keeping things open for navigation, upholding those international laws.
And of course, the U.S. Navy does those freedom of navigation operations in the South China Sea. How does China see those operations?
Well, China sees those operations as a direct challenge, like someone stepping on their toes. They see it as an attempt to undermine their claims in the region. To them, the U.S. Navy sailing through those waters, it's like poking the bear, a provocation that ramps up tension and could even lead to a clash.
So you have all these countries, their interests overlapping, and it creates this atmosphere of competition and distrust. How does having a nuclear-armed submarine at Longpo add to this mix?
Having that Type 094 submarine at Longpo, it throws another log on the fire. It sends a message, a pretty clear one, that China is ready to defend what it sees as its turf in the South China Sea, even if it means raising the stakes, even if it increases the risk of things getting out of hand.
It's classic power projection, isn't it? And China showing off its muscle, trying to scare off potential rivals and reinforce those claims in the region.
Exactly. You park a nuclear-armed submarine at a strategically vital base like Longpo. It's a potent symbol. It says something about China's growing military power, their determination to protect what they consider their core interests.
And this incident, it really shines a spotlight on the nuclear dimension of all this. How is China's growing nuclear arsenal and having advanced submarines like the Type 094, how has that impacted the balance of power, both regionally and globally?
China's been busy modernizing its nuclear forces, and it's definitely shaken things up strategically on a global level. They've developed and deployed those submarine-launched ballistic missiles, the JL-2 and JL-3 we talked about. That gives China a credible second strike capability. In other words, they can hit back with nuclear weapons even if someone tries to take out their land-based forces.
And that second strike capability, that's at the heart of nuclear deterrence theory, right? It means any country thinking about attacking, they know they'll face a devastating counterattack. So it makes them think twice about striking first.
That's exactly it. China's increased nuclear capabilities, they throw a wrench in the works for anyone thinking about using military force in the region. It makes the potential cost of conflict sky high, encourages everyone to be a bit more cautious, a bit more restrained.
So China's nuclear modernization, while some people are worried about it, could it also be seen as a force for stability, at least when you think about nuclear deterrence?
There's definitely a case to be made for that. If you have a credible nuclear deterrent, it might actually make things more stable because it lowers the chances of a full-blown war.
Right.
But it also brings new risks to the table, new complexities. You have to worry about miscalculations, accidents, things escalating out of control.
It's a tightrope walk, isn't it?
Yeah.
Trying to manage those potential benefits of nuclear deterrence while also keeping a lid on the risks that come with these incredibly powerful weapons.
That's the heart of the problem with nuclear weapons. We're dealing with technologies that could wipe out civilization. So managing those risks responsibly, that's the most important thing.
It's a heavy burden, and it requires everyone to think carefully, to be committed to talking to each other, to diplomacy, to prevent things from going wrong accidentally.
Absolutely. You need open communication. You need ways to build trust. You need agreements to control these weapons. Those are the tools we have to navigate this dangerous territory and make sure we avoid a nuclear catastrophe.
So let's come full circle back to that image that kicked off this whole conversation. What can we actually learn from this snapshot? All those complexities we've talked about, do they shed any light on China's intentions, their strategic thinking?
The image, well, it doesn't give us all the answers, but it does give us a peek into how China's military posture is changing. It shows how determined they are to be the top dog in the South China Sea. It underlines why it's so important to keep a close eye on what China's military is doing, to try to understand what's driving them, and to come up with smart strategies to deal with the challenges and opportunities their rise presents.
It's a wake-up call. We're in a new era of competition between the big powers, and we need to see things clearly, think strategically, and be committed to finding peaceful solutions to these complicated geopolitical disputes.
We're in an era where we need to understand China's ambitions, their capabilities, what they're aiming for. We can't oversimplify things. We need to have a real thoughtful conversation about all of this if we want to make it through these challenges.
It's a tall order.
Yeah.
But it's essential if we want to keep the peace, maintain stability in a world where China's influence is only growing.
It's a complex puzzle, lots of pieces to it. And this image, the submarine with those open missile hatches, it's just one piece. To really grasp what's going on, we need to be thorough in our analysis. We need to keep watching what's happening, and we need to be willing to have a real conversation with China.
So we've covered a lot of ground. We talked about the Type 094 submarine, all the technical stuff, the range of those missiles, what they can do, what it means strategically that this submarine's at Longpo. And we've looked at the bigger picture, the whole situation in the South China Sea. What are the big takeaways from all this? What should our listeners keep in mind as they watch how things develop in the region?
First off, we need to remember that China's a rising power. They have genuine security concerns, and they're determined to protect what they see as their interests, just like any other nation would. Their military modernization, building those advanced submarines and missiles, it's all part of that.
It's like a reminder that the balance of power globally is shifting. We have to adjust how we see things, how we plan our strategies to keep up with these changes.
Second point, the South China Sea, it's a messy situation. You've got those overlapping territorial claims, all those competing economic interests. Now you throw in nuclear-armed submarines. It adds another layer of risk to an already tense environment. The stakes are higher, and there's more chance for things to go wrong.
It's a powder keg. Everyone has to tread carefully, focus on finding peaceful ways to resolve things so we avoid conflict.
The third point, open source intelligence. It can be useful, but it only gets you so far. We can't be making firm judgments based only on satellite pictures or what's publicly available. To really understand China's intentions, what they're capable of, we need a more comprehensive approach. That means diplomacy, gathering intelligence, and being ready militarily.
It's important to remember we don't have all the pieces of the puzzle. We're dealing with a lot of unknowns. Being humble and willing to question our own assumptions, that's crucial in a situation like this.
Fourth thing to keep in mind, nuclear weapons, they're incredibly dangerous. The consequences could be catastrophic. China's becoming a major nuclear power. And that really emphasizes how important it is to make those global efforts to stop the spread of nuclear weapons stronger, to promote those armed control agreements, keep those lines of communication open. It's all about reducing the risk of a nuclear conflict, whether it's accidental or intentional.
It's a sobering thought, isn't it? The threat of a nuclear war, it might seem far-fetched, but it's a very real danger. We can't ignore it.
And lastly, it's so important that we have a thoughtful and informed discussion about China's role in the world. We can't fall into those easy narratives like saying conflict is inevitable or that we should just uncritically engage with them. We need a balanced approach, one that recognizes the challenges and the opportunities that come with China's rise. That's how we build a stable and prosperous future for everyone.
It's a call for nuance, for strategic thinking, for finding common ground so we can tackle the challenges we all face together.
This is a complex situation, constantly evolving. It demands our attention, and we need to do our best to navigate it responsibly.
This conversation, it's been really valuable. It's given us a framework for thinking about China's military power, their ambitions in the South China Sea, and what all this means for global security.
It's a topic that needs to stay on our radar. We need to keep analyzing it carefully, especially as events continue to unfold.
Thank you for joining us as we took this deep dive into this intricate world of geopolitics and nuclear deterrence. We hope you found this discussion insightful and thought-provoking.
It's been a pleasure sharing my thoughts with you.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.